Hello everyone, I am Leela Prabhugaonkar and I am from the Bodhi Academy. So we'll continue with the part 3 of demand analysis chapter. So earlier in this chapter we have discussed except law of demand, and then we have moved to exceptions to the law of demand, and there are various other things what we have discussed over here. We have also seen the market schedule and the individual demand curve. Okay, so now we'll see linear demand curve. Okay, so what do you mean by linear demand curve? A linear demand curve, it is a straight line, okay, and it is a negatively sloped from left to right downwards. So if we draw like this, so it is negatively sloped, okay, from left to right, and it goes downwards. So a linear demand curve is a straight line negatively sloped left to right downwards. A linear demand curve, it is how it is algebraically represented as, it is represented as this. So it means that A is equal to vertical intercept of the demand curve minus B is equal to, it means slope of the demand curve, where Px is equal to 0 and Dx is equal to A. So this is the algebraically, this is how we can represent it. The slope of the demand curve, it measures the responsiveness of change in demand with respect to the change in price. So this is what the diagram they have shown in graphically. So here on y-axis they have taken prices, and on x-axis they have taken quantity, and this is the slope what they have shown. It is negatively downwards, okay, it is sloping downwards, slopes downwards. Okay, the next what we have to understand is movement along a demand curve and shift in demand curve, that is change in quantity demanded and change in demand. Change in quantity demand, graphically known as movement along the demand curve. So there are two names over here. Graphically it is known as movements along the demand curve, and also it is called as change in demand curve. This is very important concept according to the COA board. The change in quantity demanded, this is associated with the change in price of good only, assuming other things remaining constant. And the change in quantity demanded, it is graphically known as movement along the demand curve. Okay, so demand function, how do we write demand function, is in this way, that is D is equal to Px, Py, then Y and T. So then the movement along the demand curve implicitly implies that all the determinants other than the price of good are constant, and the change in D is totally because of the change in price of good. Okay, the bar over the variable denotes that they are non-changing or they are constant. Then movement along the demand curve are of two types. So there are two types of movement along demand curve. First one is expansion of demand, second one is contraction of demand. So expansion of demand, when quantity demanded of a commodity rises with a fall in price, it is called expansion of demand. So this point is important over here. When the prices falls, the quantity demanded of a commodity rises. So when the price falls, quantity rises. It is called expansion of demand. So in this case, there is a downward movement along the demand curve. This is represented by the movement from A to B. Then contraction of demand, when quantity demanded of a commodity falls. So here quantity falls and price rises. It is called contraction of demand. And in this case, there is an upward movement along the demand curve, and this is represented by the movement from point A to D. So here they have shown shown the graphical representation, price and quantity. So expansion of demand they have shown over here. So what is happening with regards to expansion of demand? The quantity demand of a commodity rises and there is a fall in price. So since there is a fall in price, there is a downward movement. If we can see, there is a downward movement, and we have there's an arrow over here, okay, along the demand curve, and it is represented by the movement from A to B. This is that movement. Then contraction of demand, it is when the quantity is decreasing, there is a decrease in quantity and price rises. So this movement we have shown it like this, okay. So that's why it is represented by the movement from A to D, and this is moving upwards. So there is an upward movement. So with regards to contraction of demand, there is a upward movement, and with regards to expansion in demand, there is a downward movement. Okay, then change in demand, graphically known as shift in demand curve. So if demand changes due to a change in factors other than the price of good, so if demand changes due to change in factors other than the price of the good, then it is called change in demand. Okay, so in this case, the price of the good, it remains same over here. The change in demand, it is graphically known as shift in demand curve. So it is known as shift in demand curve. The shift in demand, it can be represented as this, and the bar over Px denotes that the price of the good is constant. This is important. Then shift in demand, it can be shown in the following types, that is increase in demand and decrease in demand. Now what do you mean by increase in demand? So when demand for a good increases with the change in factors other than the price of the good, then it is called increase in demand. Graphically, the increase in demand is represented by parallel rightward shift of the demand curve. Okay. The following are the factors. Now, which are the different factors that cause an increase in demand? Okay. So the first one is increase when the income of the consumer increases, then increase in the price of the substitute goods, then if there is any change in taste and preferences in favor of the commodity, then expectation of price rises in future, then if there is an increase in the total number of consumers. Okay, so this is how we show the increase in demand curve. So in the figure, if you can see, initially at price OP1, here I draw the diagram over here. So O to P, now there is an increase in demand here. So I'll denote price on y-axis and quantity demanded on x-axis. Consumer, so here so DD is the, so D1 and earlier DD. So DD is the original demand curve, and now since there is an increase in demand, we are getting a new curve. Okay, so this is T1 D1. In the figure, initially at price OP1, I'll draw this properly. So quantity demanded is given on x-axis and price is given on y-axis. Okay, y-axis. Now O to P, and this is your original demand curve. Okay, now demand is increasing. Since there is an increase in demand, okay, what is happening to the demand curve? It is increasing. So it is it is shifting rightwards, right? So new demand curve we are getting over here as D1 D1. Okay, this. So consumer purchases, so this is Q1 quantity, and now since there is an increase in demand, Q2. Okay, initially at price OP1, consumer purchases OQ1. Yes, with the change in the other factors, say if there is an increase in income of the consumer, the demand curve will shift right to the right hand side. So parallelly outwards to D1 D1. At the new demand curve, the consumer purchases more units of good OQ2, but at the same price of OP1. Okay, so this is your increase in demand. Then the next is decrease in demand. So when demand for good decreases with the change in the factors other than the price of the good, then it is called as decrease in demand. Graphically, the decrease in demand is represented by parallel shift of the demand curve. So what are the different factors that cause decrease in demand? So the first one is fall in income of the consumer. Then if the price of the goods, substitute good falls, then change in taste and preferences in against of the commodity, then expectations of price fall in future, decrease in total number of consumers. Okay, so how do we, so I'll draw decrease in demand over here. Y-axis, x-axis. Okay, so this is Q1. Then now what is happening due to the, let's say due to the fall in income of the consumer, there is a decrease in demand. So since there is a decrease in demand, this is our, earlier this was our original demand curve, right? DD. So now a new demand curve will be formed as D1 D1. So here Q2. So in the figure, initially at price OP, consumer purchases OQ1. With the change in other factors, the demand curve shifts parallelly inwards D1 D1. So demand curve will shift inside and we will get new demand curve. Okay, that is D1 D1. At the new demand curve, the consumer purchases lesser unit of the good OQ2, but at the same price of OP1. So this indicates there is a decrease in demand. Then difference between expansion of demand and increase in demand. What do you mean by expansion and increase in demand? Are these both same? Then the first one, expansion of demand is caused by fall in price of the commodity, wherein decrease in demand is caused by factors other than change in price. So such as increase in the income of the consumer, then increase in the price of the substitute goods, changes in taste and preferences, etc. Then next, how it is shown? It is shown by movement along the demand curve, and increase in demand is shown as a shift in demand curve. Then direction of change, in this case there is a downward movement. So if we in expansion of demand there is a downward movement, and with regards to increase in demand, the demand curve will shift parallelly outward. So it demand curve, there is a new demand curve over here. Okay, then what do you mean by contraction of demand and decrease in demand? What's the difference between these two? So contraction of demand is caused by rise in price of the commodity. Decrease in demand is caused by factors other than change in price. So decrease in income of the consumer, decrease in price of the substitute goods, changes in taste and preference, expectation of price fall in future, etc. Then it is shown by movement along the demand curve. Then it is shown by shift in demand curve. So in this case, if we can see the graph, there is a upward movement. okay, upward movement. And if in this decrease in demand, there is a new demand curve, but it is inside, okay, it shift inwards, new demand curve shifts inward, okay. Then cross price effect, substitute goods and complementary goods. So we know that when two or more goods are related, the change in price of one commodity affects the change for the other commodity. So this is known as cross price effect. So in the other word, cross price effect refers to the change in demand of one commodity due to change in price of other commodity. So the related goods can be of two types here, substitute goods and complementary goods. Then accordingly we study the cross price effect in case of the two related goods. So cross price effect in case of substitute goods. Substitute goods, it refers to those goods that can be consumed in place of each other, okay. For example, tea and coffee. So this is just shown with the help of the diagram, so with regards to the substitute goods. Then if we see this, substitute goods refer to those goods that can be consumed in place of each other. For example, tea and coffee. So if we can see there is a increase in price of substitute goods given over here, and there is a fall in price of substitute goods given over here. So increase in price of substitute goods, let D1 be the initial demand curve for tea. So D1 is the initial demand curve. Suppose at price OP1, the quantity demand of a tea is OQ1. Now, if the price of the coffee rises, then demand for tea will rise, okay, at the same price of tea. So this is because with the rise in the price of coffee, the consumers of coffee shift their demand towards tea. Consequently, the demand for tea rises. So the same cases are explained over here. Then again they have given the cross price effect in case of complementary goods. Okay, with regards to complementary goods, these are those goods that can be consumed together for the satisfaction of want. For example, ink pen and ink. So let D1 be the initial demand curve for ink, and at price OP1, the quantity demanded of a ink is OQ1. So now if the price of the ink pen complementary goods rises, then demand for ink pen, it is going to fall. So as ink pen and ink are consumed together, so the demand for ink will also going to fall over here. So this shift the initial demand curve for ink D1 parallelly towards to D2. In the figure we can see that at the same price OP1, the demand for ink has decreased from OQ1 to OQ2. Okay. Then substitution effect and income effect of price change. So substitution effect. So substitution effect exists because of the change in the relative price of the good. The fall in the price of one good makes it relatively cheaper than the other good as compared to what it was before the price fall, and it can be observed by the movement along the budget line. Then income effect, it is associated with the increase in the purchasing power of a consumer due to the fall in the price of good. The price fall leaves the consumer with a higher purchasing power, which enables him or her to buy more of a good with the same amount of money, and it can be observed by the shift of the budget line. Then a price fall leads to rise in the quantity demanded of a good. The rise in the quantity demanded is regarded as the total effect of the price fall. Okay. So total effect is equal to substitution effect plus income effect, and this is how it is, the explanation is given over here with regards to substitution. So this substitution effect and income effect is You can just go through it because most of the questions they ask from law of demand and the market schedule and all. Then so we'll just learn about what do you mean by normal goods and inferior goods and given goods. So normal goods, the total price effect for a normal good, it is negative. So which implies that the price and the demand for the good are inversely related to each other. And this inverse relationship exists because of the negative substitution effect together with the negative income effect. The negative sign of the substitution effect implies that as the price of the good one falls, more of good one is purchased in place of good two. Then, what do you mean by inferior goods? So, inferior goods implies that with the fall in the price of an inferior goods, the consumer increases the consumption of the inferior good. But on the other hand, the income effect of inferior good is positive. So this means that the consumer tends to reduce the consumption of the inferior good with the fall in its price. Then your given goods. So goods that are highly inferior are regarded as given goods, and similar to the inferior goods, for given goods the substitution effect is negative, okay, and the income effect is positive. So these are some things which are important as per the Goa board point of view. So this is what with regards to the demand analysis chapters and the theory of consumer behavior. Thank you for watching my video.